Okay, so thank you so much, all of you. Thank you everybody for coming out. I really appreciate each and every one of you for being here. Thank you to Pêche and to Deborah and to Roy for all of your efforts, for bringing us all here together. I think it's important to also acknowledge that this holiday season is also a time of mourning and a time of tragedy for many people. For Native Americans, it's okay. For Native Americans and indigenous peoples, oftentimes this time of the year is a reminder of how they have been erased from culture, how they have been erased from history, how this celebration comes on the backs and on the genocide and on the torture of so many millions of people. So we have to understand that this holiday was built on a country that was built on top of another people. You know, and as a marginalized person, as a trans man, and as a man of color, I couldn't stand here in good conscience and not bring that into the room as an act of solidarity and as an act of respect. And also, I think it's important to have this act of solidarity and respect. We're talking about indigenous and Native American peoples because these were the people who understood that gender and sexuality was not a binary system, but a spectrum of infinite possibilities, right? So it's important for me that I always stand in solidarity with indigenous folks. And also a truth of this time of the year is that, you know, this is a time of the harvest and of abundance, right? And I think in terms of the trans community, there has been so much abundance in our visibility. We have superstars in our communities right now. You know, we have people like Ver Cox, and we have Janet Mock, and we have Zachary, who's behind the scenes at Transparent. You know, we have Pêche. We have so many people who are doing so many things to bring the visibility of our communities into the forefront. And also there's been so much efforts and time and dedication towards dedicating resources to the needs of the trans community, particularly to our youth. You know, looking at the alarming murder rate of trans women, particularly trans women of color. 23 trans women have lost their lives this year. And I think all of them were women of color except for one, and the majority of those women of color were African American. So there is something that is happening in our culture, right? But there have been efforts. Everything that we're doing, us being here now, the work that people are doing at different organizations is to help stop the violence and to change our culture, to see a paradigm shift in our culture. So all over, there's advocacy happening for our community, right? All over this country, there are students who are fighting for their rights to be on the sports teams and use the restrooms that are aligned with their gender. You have advocates in Houston who are working tirelessly against housing inequality, trying to get this HERO bill passed. I know they shot it down, but they are still working to bring it back into the public sphere and bring it back into these people's hearts and minds to get this passed. It's so important that trans people and gender nonconforming people have equal opportunity to housing, to education, you know, to jobs. You know, they're treated right when they're in the criminal justice system. So all of these things are happening, and our visibility has increased tremendously because of these efforts. You know, that's why it's so important that trans models exist. That's why it's so important, you know, that we can be here, you know. So it's important to understand our visibility is important. Being a part of this abundance and this harvest is important. Coming together as families, as friends, as colleagues, you know, for this particular issue and to support trans models is really important. Considering that so many trans people don't have homes and don't have family or friends or community to come together in this way. So this is also an homage to them. Right? This is also important for us to be this model of possibility, you know, for all. So the visibility is a crucial part of our advocacy, you know, and I am a writer and I'm an advocate. I've been, you know, working tirelessly in the LGBT community for over a decade. You know, I started my work doing with youth as a case manager. I was a publicist for Lambda Legal, a senior media strategist at GLAAD, national spokesperson for GLAAD. Like, this is just what I do. Like, I live, the work is a part of my life, you know, and I understand that visibility is a part of it. And I've had people kind of look at me kind of sideways, like, trans models thing, like, what is up? You know, but the thing is that this is a part of the advocacy, right? Letting people know that we exist. And it's not just about like appeasing to people who believe that we are worth less just because that we are trans, right? It's not about convincing these people that we are human. It's not about trying to get people to be advocates and allies for us who really could give a shit about us. I'm not really concerned with them, right? I'm concerned with building community from the inside out. At the same time, we have to recognize that although we are very visible, that still did not prevent 23 trans women from being murdered. this year, right? It still doesn't prevent the fact that 40% of us are living under poverty, and that the national unemployment rate for trans people is 2 times that of the national average and 4 times that of the national average for transgender women of color, right? So the visibility that we are creating and the work that we're doing is important, but it's just a piece of it, right? So I want us to understand, be humble to that, and also be proud of that at the same time. So there are lots of hardships in the community, but we are more than that. Our trans experience, we're more than the statistics, we're more than heartbreak, we're more than the hardships. And taking up the space and being visible is about us being models of possibility, right? It's about us being examples of self-determination and of resilience and of courage to be exactly who we want to be. So I like to think of trans folks that we are the inspiration. We are the well of inspiration, right? Trans people, we have been an integral part of culture and of the movement, right? We're not just, they have the LGBT, and I feel like for a long time, the T has just been like an addendum to the LGBT. And right now, we are seeing that slowly change. It's because of spaces like this. It's about us being able to take up space and be able to create ally relationships and be able to establish our own companies and our own organizations and be able to commune and break bread with each other to make us all understand, the diversity of all of our humanities and of all of our truths, right? So it's things like this that makes this ring true, that we are an integral part of community and of the population and of the movement. I think for a lot of us here that are part of trans models, I'm so excited to be a part of this. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to get to know so many of you in better ways and to work with you and to see how all of our careers and lives are going to unfold because of this initiative that happens. And I'm really all about the momentum that trans models is building. And this momentum is about rethinking standards of beauty rather than trying to be accepted and defined by the standards that exist now. Right? This isn't about assimilation. This is about expanding. This is about complicating. This is about creating a multi-layered experience of beauty and existence and of livelihood and of humanity. And that is what trans people do just by us existing here. You know what I'm saying? The New York Times reached out to me and asked me to write an article, and they posed a question. And the question they posed was, what is gender? And the editor, Susan, she said to me, there's so many trans people out here and so many stories being told, and people are writing into New York Times, asking, what the fuck is gender? What is it? So just us being here is us really starting to shift something that people thought was a fundamental truth. Right? And this is what I think is important for us to understand. Like this idea of being transgender, this us having a spectrum of identities and of beauty and possibilities ain't nothing new. This is a throwback to the future. You understand what I'm saying? They'll talk about Native Americans, 150 Native American tribes who understand that there were people of two spirit, that there was a spectrum of gender, from the Native Americans of North America to the Mushe of southern Mexico, to the Bishu of Indonesia, to the Hydra of India. We all understood that gender was a spectrum and that a binary before colonization changed the trajectory of all of our lives, right? So it's important for us to start there. And I think and I want everybody to understand that, because I think what happens in the trans community is that we have a crisis of value. Right? How do we value ourselves when we're taught and was told to us is that we were born out of modernity. Like it just started at Marsha P. Johnson, right? And Sylvia Rivera, who I love and I revere, but we are before that. We are the ancient, we are the future, right? And I think having trans models and having trans people a part of this industry, what we're going to start to do is to redefine and complicate the standards of beauty around masculinity and femininity. You know what I'm saying? This isn't about passing. This isn't about being like you, as being beautiful like me in my skin. And that's what we're doing, and that's important, and that's the seed of innovation. That's the seed of modernity. That's about not being on the right side of history, but being on the right side of the future. It's looking at trans people and our self-determination and things that we've done, to ourselves and for ourselves, and all the sacrifices that we've made to be our authentic selves as a possibility for each and every one of you. Right? So I don't like for us to get caught up in this space where the trans community is just about getting your sympathies and getting your empathies and looking at our statistics and understanding that we have all these intersecting oppressions, which is true and which is right? But to also understand that we are the future. We are the seat of innovation. And I say that trans people are the seat of innovation because innovation starts with change, right? And we are change. Oh my God. Okay. I mean, we've changed so much, you know. I'll tell you a story. Speaking of change, I remember back in 2007, I was working at Glad, or not Glad, I was working at Lambda Legal at the time. And this is right at the beginning of my transition. I just started taking tea, but I hadn't told anybody yet. Right? I hadn't told my parents, and I was super close to my family. You know, and this time, you know, I'm from Buffalo, New York, which isn't far from here. So every year I would go home like 4 times a year. You know, but during this time I started transition. I would only go home like once a year for like 2 days. You know, because I saw that my body was changing, I thought that things were changing, and I was just afraid for them to know. So this gives some context, right? So I'm on tea, I'm at the beginning, body's changing, people, I'm changing, things are happening. So my mom calls me, me and my mother were very close. So my mom calls me and she said, "See, I just gotta ask you this question. I just gotta get this off my chest." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "Why do you have to be so mannish?" And I said, you know, well, that's just who I am. She said, "Why do you have to be so mannish? Why can't you be a soft butch like Ellen DeGeneres?" And I was like, you know, I was like, well, because I'm not Ellen. You know, so what's going on? And she said to me, "You know, I should have never accepted you. I should have never allowed this." She said, "What would have happened to you if I never allowed you to be like this?" And I said, "Well, Ma, I'd still be me without a mother." Yeah. And she thought about it for a minute, and she said, "Well, you ain't got enough good sense to do anything without me, so I guess I'll stick around." You know? And she was there for me. She was there for me the whole way through. In 2011, when it was time for me to have my top surgery, I still hadn't told my mom. I was still like, you know, whatever. My voice was changing. I would just shave my face. When I went home, I tried to lighten my voice. When I went home, you know, talk to people. I tried really, really hard. So it's time for me to have my surgery, right? It's time for me to have surgery. And my mom was a nurse. And my partner at the time, she was like, "You're crazy. Like, you have to tell your mother." So I'm not telling her. She's never going to see my chest. I'm just going to get this chest surgery. She doesn't have to know. She's like, "You're crazy. Your mother's a nurse. You have to tell her. You have to tell her." So it was like 3 days before I'm having surgery, right? So I'll call my mother. I'm like, "Mommy." She's like, "What's up?" I said, "So listen, I am having a double mastectomy and chest reconstruction. I'm a man." And she was like, "What? Oh my God, Lord have mercy. Oh my God, what's going on?" So she's like freaking out. She's freaking out. She's totally like having a complete meltdown on the phone. But let me tell you, 3 days later, she showed up. She showed up at that hospital and she bought me a very plush Ralph Lauren robe and some chocolates and a light blue bear, you know? And she was there. She was there for me, you know? And I remember, you know, she was there for me in the hospital. And then after I got out of the hospital, I went to her hotel room and, you know, she was crying. You know, she's crying. And I'm like, "What's up? Why are you crying?" And she's like, I feel like my daughter died. And that was really, really hard to hear. That was a very hard thing to hear. But there was some truth to that, right? Kelly talked about this in your talk when you were saying, like, you know, we all transition. You know, so I had to understand that there was a grievance. And like you were saying, it's not about being born in the wrong body. I was never wrong. It was everything outside of me that was telling me that I was wrong. My body was never wrong. I was never wrong. You know what I'm saying? And so I understood that my mother had to grieve the girl that I was, the daughter, her 4th daughter, her baby girl. She had to grieve her, and so did I. Because, you know, I wasn't born in the wrong body. I just grew away from that person. You know what I'm saying? It was like, so I had to grieve the woman that I was. You know, there were lots of spaces, particularly being in like a lesbian community, where there's lots of spaces that I can't be in anymore. Because as a man, it's important to me to understand my privileges now that I have. And understand that I can't take up certain spaces, particularly all women inclusive spaces. So there's a place of sisterhood that I left, that I've missed, right? And so not only did my mother have to go through the transition of going from a daughter to a son, but everybody did, right? I went from being a little sister to a baby brother. I went from being the favorite aunt to the favorite uncle. You know, everybody in my family had to go through this change with me. You know, so mother and I, we had that conversation. And from then on, I was he. From then on, I was TIQ. Like, she messed up here and there, but she made a concerted effort to get my name right, to get my pronouns right, always. And she always made sure everybody else did too. You know, she was my buffer for the rest of the family. She made phone calls and said, "TIQ said he is not coming home ever if you get his name wrong or if you get his pronouns pronouns wrong. You know, she would call and tell me stories about how her and her sisters, my aunties, would practice he and practice TIQ, you know, these role playing and shit, you know, they're funny. You know? So now we fast forward to June 12th, 2014. So June 12th, 2014, this was right when Laverne was on the cover of Time magazine. It was the tipping point, and I went on MSNBC and talked about this trans tipping point, and me and Laverne went on Katie Couric and talked about it, and Janet Mock was on the cover naked, on the cover of Elixir magazine. My wife was in there naked. It was the body issue. It was amazing. She was in there. Janet was on the cover. Laverne was on the cover of Time, and it was Laverne's birthday. So all this goes. So there's tons of parties. There's the Elixir party for this magazine. There's the Time party. There's a party for Laverne's birthday. All of these things are happening. But what people didn't know was, you know, they see me and my wife are here smiling and having a good time. But what they didn't know was earlier that day I got a call from my mother. And she called me and she said, baby, you got to come home right now. And I said, well, I'm coming home on the 19th. And she said, I'm not going to be here on the 19th because the cancer has mushroomed throughout my entire body. She said, the tumor in my lungs has gotten bigger than the initial tumor in my breast. You have to come home now. You have to come. So I partied with the community. And I was on the next thing smoking. And it was hard to get to Buffalo. For some reason, it was just, I couldn't get, you know, Buffalo to New York is like that. It's like a 30-minute flight. I could not get a flight home. So I got a flight from New York to Philadelphia. And I get to Philly, and then a storm came, and all the flights are grounded, and now I'm stuck in Philly, and my mother's dying. So I'm in the airport, hysterical. Okay, I'm hysterical. Like, I need to leave. So I was able to rent a car. So I said, fuck it, I'm going to rent a car, and I'm going to drive my ass to Buffalo for my mother. So, but by this time, it was late. I was tired. I didn't want to get on the road and die. Right? So serendipitously, what was happening was it was the Philly Trans Health Conference happening in Philadelphia. So I got in my car, I Googled where the health conference was happening, and I started to drive around the conference until I see transgender people. I was like, there's trans people. I parked my car and I was walking around until I saw the first trans person I knew, and I saw them and I just collapsed in her arms. I said, I'm so tired, my mother is dying, I just need to sleep. And she said, it's okay. And she gave me the key to her room, and she gave me some Oreos, Bicos, Miss Bico and Lord Hunter. That's what I saw. And gave me the keys to her room and some Oreo cookies and some Twizzlers. And I was good. And I got the rest. Arrested. My wife met me, and then we drove to Buffalo. By this time, I get to Buffalo, my mother is in hospice. She is in hospice, and she is no longer responsive. She is no longer responsive. And me and my sisters are kind of just milling around her room, right? We're just around the room doing stuff. And my sister, of course. My sister refers to me as she. And my mother whispers, he. And that was the last word she spoke. And then my mother died 2 days later. So, and I say all that just to make you understand. I tell my mother's story everywhere I go. Every stage, every time I have a microphone in front of me, every time I'm in front of people, I tell her story because I would not be the man I am today if it wasn't for her. If it wasn't for her love and her acceptance, I wouldn't be able to stand here. And it's with that love that I give to the community. It's with that love that is the foundation for everything that I do in my life, and how she was able to be a part of this change, to watch her youngest daughter grow into this handsome man, you know, and still love me was something that I can never, ever forget. It changed me, and it changed her. It innovated how she thought about everything. So when I transitioned, we had conversations about what is life, what is gender, what is God, what does any of this mean? If you can sit here and self-determine and be exactly who you want to be, when I thought you were going to be exactly something else, and still love you and still be a part of who you are, you know, it changed her world. It changed my world. And the things that we're doing, being here in this space, having trans models, taking up this space in this industry, showing that we are beautiful and that we are loved and that we are accepted, is innovation and is changing the world. So I thank all of you for being agents of change. Continue to love each other. Continue to love us. Thank you for your solidarity. And thank you for your allyship. Thank you.